Before we get started, I'm going to issue a content warning. This video essay will be discussing suicide, the events in one's life that might lead to such tragedy, and the roles of people who are closest to them. If you are, for whatever reason, uncomfortable by the subject matter, or if it hits too close to home, then I recommend that you stop watching now, as this video essay will not be a pleasant experience. On a lesser note, this video essay will also contain significant spoilers for Orange. The way humanity interacts with media is incredible. Humans have told each other stories ever since they began communicating, and from then to now the stories we tell all have something in common. They all have something to say about the world in which we live. Now, this varies from piece to piece, but any media that includes aspects of reality will inherently make a statement about that topic, whether the media's author intended to make that statement or not. For example, when Toradora depicts an unhealthy familial relationship and cutting the toxic party out is portrayed as a happy ending, it inherently makes the statement that cutting unhealthy familial bonds is a good thing. When Persona 5 depicts its scenes of rebellion as empowering, it inherently makes the statement that fighting against unjust authority is the right thing to do. However, what happens when a piece of media makes a statement that is ultimately wrong? What happens when a game makes the statement that anyone who defends disempowered women are entitled to sex? What happens when a film makes the statement that kids of divorced parents could have gotten them back together? What happens when an anime makes the statement that suicide is the fault of those closest to the victim? Chapter 1. Orange. Orange is about a high schooler named Naho who gets a letter from her future self. In this letter, Naho learns that in the new school year she will meet a boy named Naruse, who she will quickly befriend and with whom she will eventually fall in love. It also tells her that within a year of meeting Naruse, he will intentionally ride his bike into an oncoming truck, taking his own life. The letter contains pages of events that will come to pass in that year and instructions on how to prevent Naruse's suicide. There's plenty to like about Orange. It's one of the strongest slice of life shows I've ever seen. The characters are all well defined and act as friends would. The budding romance between Naho and Naruse is charming and comes off as genuine. Naruse acts the way many real depressed people do. He covers up the fact that he's upset, and he is hesitant to do things that used to bring him joy. We even get some very heartwarming moments where Naho and her friends not only tell Naruse that he's not alone, but actively demonstrate it. Just as the pressure of keeping Naruse alive starts to break Naho down, she reaches out to one of her friends and quickly discovers that everyone in her circle got a letter too, and from then on, saving Naruse becomes a group effort. The letter that Naho receives doesn't instruct her to do anything more than overcoming her insecurities and acting on the feelings she has for Naruse. Other instructions come down to simple things like, Naruse had a bad day today, please check in on him. Or, you accidentally say something insensitive tonight, please avoid doing so. All in all, there are some reasonable requests. However, there's also this sense of unease when you consider what these instructions imply. Chapter 2. Naruse. It turns out that Naruse started the story on bad terms with his mother, who moved him from the city he grew up in and forced him to not join his new school soccer team, even going so far as to throw out his old gear. When he spends time with Naho and her friends after his first day at the new school, he does so instead of honouring a commitment he made that he would accompany his mother to a doctor's appointment. When Naruse's mother tells him to leave his friends, he becomes upset with her, telling her over text that he is happier with this group of people than he has been in a long time. These are the last words that he ever tells his mother before she takes her own life. Throughout the show, he suffers from suicidal thoughts over the guilt he has for not being there for his mother. He falsely believes that he is responsible for her death. Naho and her friends do what they can to be there for Naruse, but ultimately this guilt weighs heavy on him for the rest of the story. The tipping point is when he finds his mother's old phone and discovers that she had written a reply to his text that she never sent. One in which she explains why she decided to move to the country and why she forced him to quit soccer. The message frames her misdeeds as coming from a place of compassion, as a way to protect him. After discovering this text, Naruse storms out of his home, having a guilt-induced mental breakdown, and in the original timeline, it's shortly after this that he takes his life. In the new timeline, however, when he is about to be hit by the truck, he changes his mind at the last second, deciding that he wants to live. There are two differences between the original timeline and the one which we see. The difference that gets the most attention and credit for saving Naruse's life is that he wanted to see his friends again. Chapter 3. The Problem. Naha and her friends weren't able to prevent his mother's suicide or keep him from finding the text that sent him over the edge, so all they did to save Naruse's life was be better friends. Now on paper that might sound like a nice sentiment, that it was friendship that prevented a tragedy. The problem is that it inherently places the blame for the original Naruse's death on the shoulders of Naha and her friends. If only Naha had forced herself to overcome her anxiety quicker. If only Hiruto were more willing to sacrifice his happiness for the sake of Naruse's. If only the rest of the group could have been there for him more. That they could have saved his life if only they were better people. This narrative inherently carries the statement that one can prevent suicide with friendship, and as much as it pains me to say it, that simply isn't true. If taken at face value, this message can encourage people to treat suicidal thoughts like a bad mood, something that will pass given enough time and moral support. The lack of validity in that mindset is what makes the message a dangerous one. What makes it cruel is that it inherently puts the responsibility of suicide prevention onto the shoulders of loved ones. Imagine for a moment that someone you love had taken their life. Now imagine that you've watched this show where a group of people save someone from that fate by being better friends. What could that possibly say to you other than you could have saved them, but you weren't good enough? There are two solutions to this problem. Two ways that the show could have avoided such a devastating message. First of all, while some of the instructions in the letters were decent, they all should have written in thick red ink, "Get Naruse professional help." In the real world, it takes a counselor, doctor, or psychiatrist to fix the root cause and create long-term change for someone who has suicidal thoughts. Suppose Hiruto had taken Naruse to see a doctor after their emotional confrontation in the classroom. In that case, even if he had wound up on the streets that night, it could have been a professional's advice that made him reconsider what he was doing. The message from that scene would have been that it was seeking professional help that saved Naruse's life. A message that is far less dangerous and far more accurate to reality. The second solution is one that appears in the show, but the narrative brushes it off as inconsequential. I mentioned earlier that two things had saved Naruse's life that night. The first was having better friends, but the second was not having access to his bike. In the original timeline, Naruse was riding on his bicycle when he veered in front of the truck. But in the current timeline, Saku sabotages the bike so that Naruse cannot use it. While regular individuals may not be able to help a suicidal person attain mental stability, they can limit the ways in which such a person can hurt themselves. In the end, this story not only conveys the message that suicide can be prevented with friendship, but that it's a friend's responsibility to prevent it. Whether the author intended it or not, that's what the narrative is saying by the way its core conflict is resolved. While friends can provide support and comfort, suicidal thoughts will not go away because people are friendly. It's an issue that requires professional intervention, and the fact that this show tells us otherwise is wrong, dangerous, and it spits in the face of anyone who has lost a loved one in such a tragic way. The point of this video is not to say that severe subject matter should never be covered by media. Absolutely not. Hacksaw Ridge uses the graphic violence of war to highlight its theme of compassion. Big Hero 6 showcases genuine grief to accentuate its themes of selflessness and heroism. Watamote portrays severe anxiety to send a message of hope to those who suffer in similar ways. Whenever any piece of media uses an aspect of reality, it will inevitably make a statement about that topic. What we as viewers need to do is decipher that message and work out if it makes a positive, truthful, or helpful statement about the world it exists in, or if it shares a message that is negative, dishonest, or dangerous. That's it for this video, I say. I'd like to thank my patrons, Orion Tram, Quincy Chamberlain, Jaman5, Lars Espen, Shark, Data52, Nerxu, Pixcalibur, Alberto Cruz, Tyler Bennett, and Tenka. If you or someone you love suffers from suicidal thoughts, I have left Lifeline numbers on screen and in the description. If your country isn't covered, I've also left a link to suicide.org's list of hotline numbers around the world. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.